As part of Ferrari Fridays, William Ross from the Exotic Car Marketplace will be discussing all things Ferrari and interviewing people that live and breathe the Ferrari brand. Topics range from road cars to racing, drivers to owners, as well as auctions, private sales, and trends in the collector market.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the Ferrari Marketplace. As you can see, I'm trying to get a little more regular about this and schedule Tuesdays for dropping new episodes here. So I'm getting a little more diligent about things. I know I've said that in the past, but hey, you know what? Try and get what I get done, right? So lots of things going on. But trying to get a little more structured here and everything like that. So and get some more of these things out and kind of get some more stories out there, some more history, some more background, some more of my opinions. Hey, and if you guys ever want to shoot some of yours out there, just let me know. You know how to get a hold of me, William at the FerrariMarketplace.com. So today's episode, what we're going to talk about is probably the sexiest car ever made, in my opinion. It's up there in the top 5, at least if it's not 1 or 2. And it's definitely probably the sexiest Ferrari ever built, in my opinion. I could be wrong. Other people have that. Hey, it's everyone's own choice. But in my mind, I think it is. And as you can tell from the title, we are talking about the Ferrari 330 P3. That sexy, beautiful car from back in the late 60s, mid-late 60s, that they built up to start tackling to go against the GT40s that were coming and started wanting to dominate. So, yeah, Le Mans. So, as everyone knows, the story of Ford versus Ferrari and everything like that. Ford, old the Deuce wanted to buy Ferrari because Ferrari was up for sale. He was in money troubles and was trying to sort himself out. But and so he really didn't care about the road car division. Obviously, as everyone knows, he was more about his racing cars. That's what his love and his passion was. He built road cars just to fund his racing. But anyways, so after that deal collapsed, ever so historically and very, very well known now, and how everything went down, I'm sure there are tidbits of that story that we will never know, because everyone involved are deceased. So, but I mean, talk about wanting to be a fly on the wall in those meetings and everything that went on. That would have been just unbelievable to know the actual true story of how things really kind of went down in the offices, their discussions and what have you. It's all coming from third, fourth, fifth party, what have you. So, and I'm sure it's got diluted and watered down, and the old telephone storyline thing is by the time it gets to everyone, it's been got 10 different versions of the story. But anyways, as we know, Ford started bringing the GT40s and to start racing in the FIA World Championship, Sports Car Championship, and they weren't doing too hot right after the beginning. They had big problems, everything like that, and everyone knows because Ford was trying to do it, and that's when they turned everything over to Carroll. So anyways, in 1966 is when some big changes happened in the World Sports Car Championship. Now since 1962, it's been pretty much decided by production of race Grand Touring cars, i.e. like the 250 GTO and whatnot. So, but they also, starting in 1966, is they actually implemented, that they get, purpose-built machinery could contest a limited number of the World Championship events. And those points would go toward a separate championship for the prototype machinery. Now, that all changed in 66, though, when the FIA Appendix J regulations were ushered in. Now, the main event for everything and the Manufacturers' Championship decided by Group 6 prototypes split into over and under 2-liter classes. So, Group 6 had no minimum production requirements, and the championship would be contested over 7 races, 8 in the case of the under 2-liter cars. Now, running simultaneously at most events, and with some standalone events for the smaller engine cars, was the International Sports Car Championship for Group 4 cars. Now, to qualify for Group 4, a manufacturer had to build 50 examples of the vehicle we wanted to race. The 3 Group 4 classes were for under 1,300 cc machinery, those with engines between 1,301 and 2,000, and then those with placing over 2,000 cubic inches, 2,000 cc's, whatever you want to pronounce it. Now, the Group 3 Grand Touring cars were still permitted to run at most events, but were no longer eligible for the championship points. Significantly, minimum production requirement had been hiked from 100 to 500 vehicles. Now, the premier over 2-liter class of the 1966 Manufacturer Championship for the Group 6 prototypes here comprised of these races: 24 Hours of Daytona, the Sebring 12 Hours, the Monza 1,000 kilometers, the Targa Florio, awesome race, the Spa 1,000 kilometers, the Nürburgring 1,000 kilometers, and the Le Mans 24 Hours. However, only the best 4 results would actually count towards their final points tally, which is pretty good. I mean, so you can knock out, a couple of your worst events, which could come in handy, except if, you were doing good in all of them. So, but that is kind of an interesting approach to it. And, just, hey, out of those, it was just your best 4 points that actually went towards the championship. Now, to tackle this growing threat from Ford and their GT40s, obviously they were tweaking, refining those cars. Ferrari created the new 330 P3, that gorgeous car, a piece of machinery. Now, the P3 was reserved strictly for use by the works teams, while Ferrari's satellite squads, probably by their distributorships, i.e., like NART and stuff like that, they would be supplied with P2s that had been brought up to a P2/3 specification, which ran less complex single overhead camshaft engines. So just a little simpler motors in the cars. And, they did all right, but hey, Ferrari's, the work squads didn't want to have, something going against them. So anyways, so they also came up with an under a 2-liter Group 4 challenge for 1966, the Dino 206S, which had very similar look and feel to it as the 330 P3s, but obviously smaller engines, what have you, a bit smaller size. Now, both the P3 and the Dinos were unveiled at the Maranello's press conference in February 1966. Now, unfortunately, those labor strikes were paralyzing Italy at the time, which led to Ferrari to attend the first 5 races of '66 with just a single P3 entry, while the ambitious 50-car homologation target for the Dino 206 never came close to being achieved because of all the labor strife and everything in Italy. As people, if you're a history person, buff, whatever, and it wasn't just the car industry, but just labor in general, they were paid absolutely crap. They were probably working 12, 14-hour days, 6, possibly 7 days a week. I mean, they just took advantage of these people beyond belief. And these people needed to, hey, they got to pay their bills, keep a roof over their head, feed their families, and everything like that. So, now the new P3 was based around a new T-Boat 603 tubular steel space frame chassis. It's reinforced with aluminum panels to create kind of a semi-monocoque effect. It had about a 2,400 millimeter wheelbase that was carried over from the P2. The engine and the gearbox were now, integral part of the structure, stressed member of the structure. Now, along with the bonded fiberglass underside that extended into the rocker panels. As a consequence of all this, the torsional rigidity was much improved. So you had a much better handling car, much stronger, more rigid. As everyone knows, the more stiffer the car is, the better you can make that thing go. So the suspension was pretty similar to the P2, equal length wishbones, coil springs, Dutchable stocks, anti-roll bars, the standard stuff. And they had vented disc brakes that were supplied by Girling, mounted inboard of the rear differential at the rear. So, kind of standard stuff. They had the 15-inch center lock wheels, and you run on Firestones, though, instead of Dunlops, which was kind of an interesting switch. And they had a 57-liter fuel tank that was housed in each sill. So 2 gas tanks, capacity almost basically around 114 liters. That's how that math works. Yeah. So the engine, let's get to that. Now the engine, the heart of this beast, was just a dry sump 4-liter direct overhead camshaft 60-degree V12 of Colombo design and lineage. Now, unlike the P2, which had used both 3.3 and 275 and 330 engines, the P3 only ever ran with the 4-liter power unit. Now, the P3's motor was the first engine from Maranello to feature Lucas fuel injection, as opposed to the Webers that they had been using in the past. So it kind of was a big jump, I guess you'd say, technology going from fuel injection from carburetors. So it also came with twin spark ignition, some lightweight cylinder heads and a higher compression ratio. Not a lot, but a little bit bigger. Displacement was all the way up to 3,967 cc's thanks to an unchanged. The bore stroke was basically the same as 77 by 71. Now, peak output put this baby at 420 horsepower. Now, imagine that. That car was light. There wasn't much there. So, 420 horsepower. I mean, it doesn't sound like a lot, but remember, you had a car that weighed, probably under 2,000 pounds easily. There wasn't much there. So just a 5-speed tranny, Borg Warner. I'm sorry, not a Borg Warner. My bad. But just a standard 5-speed Tipo 593 gearbox. So I don't know why I said Borg Warner. As soon as I immediately see it talk about transmissions, I immediately jump to a Borg Warner for back in the day. So that's just me. My apologies. Hey, what can you do? Now the bodywork was actually an evolution from the P2 from '65. They had the front of cars a nice wide oval intake. They here housed some brake ducts to keep those brakes nice and cool, and stacked headlights under some plexiglass covers. Dome windscreen gave a great view out the front. You could have great vision what's going on around you, especially in front of you. And there was also a roofless Spider variant that was created for that also. So they had a couple different versions. You had the Heart, Spider, Berlinetta, everything. So, anyways, you got some cooling slots, everything cut in, by the sills from the doors, behind the rear wheels. Where tail was, not anything crazy. Back then they really weren't getting in all those wings and all that kind of stuff. So, but all these body panels were fabricated from some real thin gauge aluminum. Obviously to keep that lightweight down. And if you're ever at a show or something, don't ever even put your hand on it, because they'll just it'll dent those cars. So, and per regulations, whatnot, you had to have the 2 seats. So you had 2 tiny seats stuck in there. So to keep everyone in, and I don't know. I mean, obviously you can go for a ride in the passenger seat, but obviously it wasn't meant to have someone in there while they were racing. So, and every P3, which is interesting, was all built in right-hand drive with the right-hand gear change. So they had it on the right-hand drive, but which I always thought was interesting, because you see these cars that England, everywhere they got it's right-hand drive car, your gear selector it's always in the center. But if you look at all those cars back in the day that were right-hand drive, you look at the Porsches, they were the same way. They have 917, all that stuff. They had the gear selectors on the right, so the gear safety was going down the sill. So it was kind of interesting, and weight 850 kilograms. So do your adjusted math. Yeah, it's under 2,000 pounds. I think my math's correct on that. Again, if I'm wrong, I apologize. Metric system and kilograms and all that stuff. I'm American. What do I know? So doing those things over like that. So the beautiful thing is they had a top speed, not quite 200 miles an hour. They could probably top out about 192 to 193, depending on that day, temperature, and what have you. And obviously, again, back day, but you could still get under in under 4 seconds up to 60 miles an hour. So production on these, Ferrari only built 3 examples of the P3 for '66. So we had chassis 0844, that was a Berlinetta that contested at Monza, Spa, and Le Mans. You had chassis 0846, that was a Spider that contested 4 races. That was Sebring, the Targa Florio, the Nürburgring, and Le Mans. And another Berlinetta of 0848 was another Berlinetta that only contested at Le Mans. So for '66, they had great set of, employed some awesome drivers. Everyone's going to know these names in '66. Mike Parks, John Surtees, Ludovico Scarfiati, Nino Vaccarella, Lorenzo Bandini, Jean Guillet, Pedro Rodriguez, Bob Bondurant, Mario Cassoni, and they would go out there and challenge the Ford and Chaparral's team and take it to them. Now, Ford only announced in '66 they were going to contest just the 3 rounds for the championship in their MK2 GT40. Those were just the 24 hours Daytona, 12 hours Sebring, 24 hours Le Mans. Now, by contrast, Ferrari was going to attend every race bar of the season over Daytona, just because there was something there, but now I don't think the car was ready to get it over there, so they didn't bother. But that was that infamous one where Ford took the 1, 2, 3, and 5th. But the best place Ferrari would have been Nart's 365 P2, which took 4th in the hands of Rodriguez and Andretti. Now, P3 made its competitive debut at the Sebring in 12 hours on the 23rd of March, with Parks and Bondurant starting from second on chassis 0846 behind the works Ford GT40s of Gurney and Grant. So there's 5 other ones in there, and a couple other chaparrals that were in that top 10 of that qualifying that race that year. Now, having led for much of the first hour, the P3 was subsequently occupied the second and third position, turning on stops for fuel and drive change. It was lined second when Bondurant became stranded out on circuit to seize gearbox at about 3/4 of the distance. Again, Ford's finished first, second, and third. So, faulty gearbox took him out. Now, Ferrari chose not to attend the Le Mans test in April for that year. They were just happy to conduct their testing at Monza for the 1,000 kilometers, but more than likely that was kind of dictated by the labor disputes that were still going on. So, John Surtees returned to the team back for the next Monza race. Now, it was his first race back since his near-fatal accident at the Canadian GP Can-Am race that previous September. Now, in the absence of any work forwards, the Chaparral, Surtees, and Parks the commanding win in Italy and driving a P3 Berlinetta chassis 0844. You can imagine that. In Italy, winning in that car, I think the crowd must have been going nuts. Now, the team entered the P3 Spider chassis 0846 for the Targa Florio that was held on May 8th. Now, Vaccarella and Bandini were supported by a bunch of Dinos. Now, Ford and Chaparral were, again, absent, which the biggest threat to Ferrari came from the 5-car Porsche Works team with their team of the Group 6 906s. Now, the event saw the P3 battle out with experimental 8-cylinder 906 of Gunther Class, Colin Davis, until Bandini hit a curve about 2/3 of the distance and crashed the P3 while in second position. Unfortunately, the more fancy pair of the Porsche also fell by the wayside after making contact with one another, which resulted in a victory. 906 of William Maurice and Herbert Mueller. The Dino of Guchet and Baghetti finished second and won in its class. Now, hey, if I'm hacking up these names, I apologize. I'm not Italian and I'm not foreign, so I can't pronounce these things great. Now, at Spa, they went on to do basically a flag-to-flag victory with the chassis 0844, and 2 weeks later, I'm sorry, I got that messed up. I'm reading my notes. My bad. So, getting on this, so we're kind of jumping ahead, and a few more things now. We're going to get, kind of more into talking about now. I'll get to the point. At the Spa 1,000 kilometers, they went flag to flag, and took it to them. So that was outstanding. Now, going into second place were Parks and Surtees in the Spider, the 0846. Now, that was the final race. The final race prior to the Le Mans was the Nürburgring 1,000 kilometers. So now they started on pole ahead of the Chaparral of Bonner and Phil Hill, which they were making their European debut. However, while Surtees pulled clear of Bonner during the first hour, the P3 came in soon after for an unscheduled check and had to get a shock absorber replaced. So, obviously dropping down the order, Parks had to actually move the car back into 8th before the rear suspension just collapsed, just after Surtees had taken the wheel for a second stint. So then a clutch failure at 3/4 distance put the 0846 chassis out for good, and the Chaparral went on to win, but they were chased home by a bunch of Works Dinos. So they still were represented pretty well, but the P3 didn't have much luck at that race. So with 2 wins apiece for Ford and Ferrari for the 66 championship, the race was decided to result in 24 Hours Le Mans, which took place, obviously, the weekend of June 18th and 19th. Now, for this event, Ferrari had a trio of P3s in attendance for Parks and Surtees in 0848, Gouchet and Bandini in 0844, Rodriguez and Ginter in 0846. Now, unfortunately, a disagreement between Surtees and the team manager Eugenio Dragoni saw the Englishman walk out. He was placed by reserve driver Ludovico Scarfiati. I think everyone might know that story because, obviously Dragoni had some favoritism going on, and Surtees was not pleased about what was going on in the team orders that Dragoni was putting together. So he just said, screw this. He got in his car. I believe I can't remember what one it was. It was a Ferrari, and he got in it and drove to the factory in Maranello to confront Enzo face to face about it because he was just not happy. So now, getting back to the race, despite the presence of 4 P2s and 3s from Ferrari's satellite teams, the race was a disaster for Ferrari. Scarfiotti wrecked 048 when he smashed into a near stationary Matra soon after midnight. Rodriguez and Ginter went out shortly before mid-distance with a gearbox failure while lying fourth, and the much-delayed Bandini-Goucher machine blew a head gasket during the 17th hour, having limped around with an overheating engine for quite some time. Now, as we know what happened with that one, because thanks to their Ford's famous 1-2-3 finish at Le Mans, Ford won the championship by 38 points to Ferrari's 36. So, that's kind of a brief thing. I might have hacked that up a bit, and I apologize. So, that's my bad. It's trying to read my notes. My handwriting is absolutely horrendous. But as people know, looking at these P3s, they're absolutely stunning cars. Trying to find one come up for sale now is probably, you're not going to see it. Any of those are going to change. They're going to change hands privately. Those are going to be done off market, and those are going to be sold for several millions of dollars. But hopefully, owners that get those cars and they utilize them, take them out, take them to Goodwood, take them to the events, take them to Pebble Beach. Stretch your legs, get them. Those cars are made to be driven. All cars are made to be driven. Being stacked in places is unfortunate. God bless these museums and stuff, but you really need to get out there and let those cars stretch your legs a bit. So, anyways, that's kind of what I wanted to chit chat about today, and kind of go over that. So, if anybody's got any questions or any corrections, which there probably are in this, please email me, william@theferrarimarketplace.com. Let me know. Want to get a little more interactive with you guys? I know there's don't have hundreds of thousands of people listening, but we do have a nice little select few so far, it looks like. So, hey, reach out, let me know. Hey, suggest a topic, let me know. I got research notes on tons and tons of stuff. Like I said, so we're going to kind of get this going on a weekly thing and drop new ones every Tuesday. So, again, hey, I appreciate you guys listening. And, hey, share it around, spread it around, and get other people listening. And like I said, I'm going to try and get some guests on and see what I can do. And, of course, I'm going to have to figure out how to do that with someone that's not in the same place as me. So again, I'm not the most tech savvy person. So again, guys, hey, I really appreciate you guys listening, and take care, and we will be back next week. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
This episode has been brought to you by Grand Touring Motorsports as part of our Motoring Podcast Network. For more episodes like this, tune in each week for more exciting and educational content from organizations like the Exotic Car Marketplace, the Motoring Historian, Break Fix, and many others. If you'd like to support Grand Touring Motorsports and the Motoring Podcast Network, sign up for one of our many sponsorship tiers at www.patreon.com/GT Motorsports. Please note that the content, opinions, and materials presented and expressed in this episode are those of its creator, and this episode has been published with their consent. If you have any inquiries about this program, please contact the creators of this episode via email or social media as mentioned in the episode.